I'm going to go ahead and knock this out just so people know who you are.
Yeah, please.
When asked about his greatest inspiration in life, Phil Palmer dedicated this title to his grandfather, a Vietnam Marine Corps veteran, as well as his father and the men of IT Transition Training 0111. He testifies that from all these motivating figures, he learned to be the strong and resilient individual he is today. Phil has carried his love for helping others throughout his career and is now the founder, president, and executive director of WarriorWOD. You could say you're the father of WarriorWOD as well.
I mean, yeah, I guess it's a good title.
Yeah. Having graduated from the Citadel in 2005 and commissioned as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Marine Corps, Phil's military career took him to serve in pivotal roles, including serving as a combat advisor in Iraq, staff platoon commander at the basic school, operations officers for the Marine Corps Martial Arts Center of Excellence, and finally an operations officer for the Security Force Assistance Program at TCOM. His commendable service over the years earned him numerous awards such as the Purple Heart and Army Commendation Medals with Valor, and multiple Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medals with Valor, among many other recognitions. Beyond his decorated military career, Phil faced challenges after being diagnosed with post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury, TBI, upon his honorable discharge in 2013. However, he discovered a source of healing and strength in physical fitness and nutrition. Realizing that many veterans struggled with similar invisible wounds, Phil established WarriorWOD in June of 2021. WarriorWOD, under Phil's motivational leadership, has positively impacted hundreds of veterans' lives since its founding. This program prioritizes exercise, nutrition, and mentorship as prescriptions for veterans' recovery from PTS, providing hope for those who have served for our nation. Phil's extraordinary journey of service and compassion continues to empower and uplift, creating lasting change in the lives of our nation's heroes through the transformative power of WarriorWOD. Phil's vision and dedication to veterans have earned him accolades, including being a regional Jefferson Award recipient. Additionally, his passion for physical fitness led him to embark on an astounding 4,000 skydives. In addition to his role at WarriorWOD, Phil excels in his career as the director of sales for Liquid Web, a global IT hosting company. His commitment to empowering clients' growth and success reflects his unwavering dedication to excellence. As a true fitness enthusiast, he dedicates time daily to exercise, aligning with WarriorWOD's mission. Now, I think I might have to go back to that one more time at the very end of this, just to make sure.
It's very humbling to hear all that.
Well, there's a lot of great information, obviously, here that just gives us a really good understanding of who you are as an individual. Yeah. And what's been really cool about this experience of going through and having conversations just with different people from different perspectives and backgrounds is to realize how unique somebody's experiences actually are, right? This is not an everyday sort of conversation, right? It's not every single day that you get to have a conversation with somebody who's been or had your experiences, been overseas, actually been in combat zones, actually jumped out of a plane for how many times? 4,000 times?
4,000 times.
So you're a top 1%er in a lot of different ways, right? And I actually thought about this a lot recently, where we like to compare ourselves to others all the time. We always compare ourselves to others. Yeah. But when you think about it at the end of the day, you're absolutely a 1%er in so many different ways that others would never be. That's not just wealth or not just whatever, but there's so many different ways that you're very uniquely your own person and also have an amazing background. So
I appreciate that, but I would say, it's very easy for us to compare to other people. I've got neighbors that make more money than me. I have neighbors that have greater accolades. Who am I competing against? None of them. Right. I'm competing about myself. I want to be, and you said 1%. I would like to change that dynamic a little bit. I want to be 1% better every single day. Yep. Not compared to anybody else, but compared to myself, right? And so when I think about it, and okay to cuss in here?
Absolutely. Okay, cool. This is as genuine as it gets.
I don't give two shits about my neighbor next door. Yeah. He's a great dude, but at the end of the day, I'm not competing against him. Right. I don't care what he drives. I don't care how big his house is. I don't care what his mortgage is. Am I 1% better than I was yesterday? And any accolades that I have is just in that pursuit. Right. Can I be better than I was yesterday? And when as you read that, it was very humbling to hear a lot of those things, because I don't go back and read that stuff. But everything you just said, I would like to think I'm a number of percentages better than what's on my profile, what's on my bio, because that was written a year ago. What have I done yesterday to make myself better today? So
right. And I think going back to my point about the 1%, that's kind of where my thought process started the other day, right? I was like, I don't have a tattoo yet. I was like, but that'd be a really good one. Where it's like people always talk about giving like 110%, right? I would love to give 110%, but I'd also just like to be 1% better, or 0.5% better, 0.1%, 0.01% better every single day, if at all possible.
Yeah. How many days are in the year?
65.
And if you're 1% better, how much better are you at the end of the year?
65%.
Yeah. And so is that reasonable? Probably not, right?
Yeah.
But 0.00001 is better.
Yeah.
We can look at it from a fitness standpoint. We can look at it from an economy standpoint. We can look at it from a job performance standpoint. In every aspect of your life, are you just better than you were yesterday?
I appreciate the shirt.
Yeah.
This is actually fits super well in comparison to a lot of my shirts that don't. So this is going to be one that I'm going to be working out in here soon. I might have to get a few more from you.
Yeah, by all means.
Considering they fit this well.
We use Next Level. Got to give them a huge shout out. The shirts fit very well, and they hold up to whatever the workout is.
Right.
I can't tell you how many shirts, WarriorWOD shirts I have. But every single day that I work out, I wear one of my WarriorWOD shirts, and they hold up to the grind, man. They really do.
So you, in starting WarriorWOD, I guess we'll kind of start there. We can go back. We already talked a little bit about the Citadel earlier, and kind of some of our fun experiences there.
Yeah.
And both getting removed from our companies, and we can kind of talk about that. Neither one of us is a bad person. We can kind of delve into that in that sense. But it was, they were both kind of life-changing events for us that made us realize a lot about ourselves at the end of the day.
Oh, yeah.
We getting removed from a company and losing rank, and then kind of figuring out, later on, as we reflected back on it, that it wasn't, really that big of a deal. It actually was very helpful for us and better understanding a lot about ourselves. But kind of past that, let's kind of start with WarriorWOD first and foremost.
Yeah.
What was when you were considering starting WarriorWOD, the very, very beginning? A lot of people don't even do it, right? A lot of people don't take the chance. They don't start the thing. They think about it. They talk about it. They don't actually do it. What was the kind of the thing that pushed you to just finally go, hey, I got to do this. It's time.
That's a very, very loaded question, right? And we could talk about my journey to find recovery. That had a huge aspect of it. We could talk a little bit about my move to Charleston, where I met an amazing individual, Justin Riccio. I consider him one of my closest friends. And hearing his story through his brother who served, and some of the struggles his brother had. But the moment that we made the choice, Justin and I were working out. This is during COVID. But we're in the gym, we're working out. And I picked up my cell phone and I looked down and I got a text message. And that year during COVID, I lost 6 guys that I either served with or I knew very well that had served in the United States Army, Marine Corps, Air Force, Navy, that took their own lives. And Justin with his story, myself with my story, we looked at each other and we said almost, simultaneously in our own ways, but, just to summarize, we can no longer be on the sideline. We've lost too many individuals to suicide that there has to be a better way. And so I went home and I talked to my beautiful wife. And we had a long conversation about it, and we're in the middle of planning a wedding, and I've got to sing my wife's praises. Amazing individual. And I don't remember if she said it or if I said it, but one of us said it. If we spend the rest of our lives doing this and we save one person's life, it's worth it. And so we started it in the middle of planning a wedding, in the middle of not knowing what the hell a nonprofit was, in the middle of just COVID and all the restrictions associated with that. We made the decision that we were no longer going to stand for watching people take their lives and do nothing about it. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, there's a lot more to our Genesis story, but that was the pivotal moment that we looked at it. All three of us made the decision that this has to stop.
I think about it personally in the sense of, you know, knowing people who have taken their own lives, right?
Yeah.
But not 6 people in the same year.
Oh yeah.
I think that for me in and of itself is super hard to hear, and especially knowing how many people I know that are in the military or have been in the military as well. I still don't know of 6 individuals in the military that are my friends that have taken their life in a single year.
Yeah.
So that in and of itself is.
Well, let me paint you a picture, man.
Here.
And I'm going to ask you some questions. It's all right if you don't know these statistics. Yeah. It's my life, so I learn these statistics quite a bit. But in 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan, I know it extended a little longer than 20 years, but let's say 20 years, 9/11 until 2021.
Right.
How many military personnel do you think we lost in combat?
I want to say it was between 5,000 and 7,000.
It was right at 7,000. Depending on what report, it was slightly below or slightly over, right? And some reports include other government agencies, some do not. But just for demonstration purposes,
right.
7,000 in 20 years in war in 2 different fronts, Iraq and Afghanistan. Syria was kind of part of that for a little while, but at the end of the day, 7,000. And I'm using my words very clearly here. Based off of the VA's way that they count veteran suicides, how many do you think we lose a year to veteran suicide?
I want to say the last statistic I saw is still 21 to 22. Is it a day?
A day. Yeah. So
whatever that math.
That's a longer conversation. Yeah. So in 2013, and I'm going to back up the VA a little bit because I've got nothing against the VA, right? Yeah. In 2013, they put out a report that said 22 a day. They retracted that information. For whatever reason, that was not an accurate piece of information, but we got behind that. And that's why we do the 22 push-ups a day kind of thing. Based off of 2022, so they're usually about 2 years out of their statistics, we lose 16.8 veterans a day. That being said, there's a lot of constraints around the VA. Anybody that collects data, you got to understand that there's constraints. And again, not against the VA, but there's constraints. The obituary has to say, or not the obituary, the morgue has to say it was a suicide, right? You've got people taking their lives and harming themselves that aren't claimed as suicides. There's also an abundance of people taking their lives through substance abuse. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in a moment. The other aspect of it, and I haven't confirmed this to be 100% true, but I think it is, for the VA to count you in that statistic, you have to get care from the VA. What percentage of veterans do you think get care from the VA?
It's half, hopefully.
30%. So, and there's reasons for that, right? Like, if you come back and you've never seen combat, you've never been put in harm's way, you've never done anything but an admin's job, right, you may not have what they call service-connected disabilities. And when you leave the military, if you don't have the disabilities or issues that you received during your time in your service, you technically don't rate a disability rating, right? There's also individuals that because they had a other than honorable or dishonorable discharge, they don't get disability ratings. They're not even considered, Now, on a tangent on this, I was 22 years old as a lieutenant, and there were several times I would drink and drive because I was a dumb 22-year-old, and if I would have gotten caught, I would have had a dishonorable discharge. The difference between me and those that got a dishonorable discharge is I didn't get caught. That's at the heart of it, right? But at the end of the day, 70% of veterans don't qualify. And if that rumor is true, that they only count based off of the number of veterans that actually have care from the VA, then you could quickly see that's jaded. Because that other 70%, a lot of them, they feel like the military turned their back on them. They were separated under dishonorable discharges, and they made a stupid, immature mistake. They're great people. They deserve the respect and admiration that, for their military service, but they made a mistake.
Right.
So we add that into the equation, all right? And so when we think about the 16.8, that information is jaded. So American Warrior Project, which is a big think tank for veteran research, they partnered with Duke University. I think it was Duke University. Don't quote me on that, but I'm 99% sure it was Duke University. And they came to the conclusion, based off of their research, that the number that the VA puts out is actually 2.4 times greater.
Really?
Yeah. So I'm not the smartest man. I graduated from the Citadel, great college, but they don't produce the smartest people, right? But really fast, that's what? 32 and some change, so almost 40 veterans a day take their lives. What's also not included is those that die from substance abuse. And when I look at the equation, why are people taking their lives? Well, they would rather numb their pain through suicide quickly than face their demons anymore. Or they would rather drink themselves to death, whether that's an overdose, kidney failure, or liver failure, than face their demons any longer. Right. So I think those numbers need to be added in there. So let's take that to the next step. I'm working into, a analogy or a picture here. Have you ever seen the Vietnam Memorial in DC?
The one DC, yes.
How many names do you think are on there?
Lots.
58,000.
Yeah.
My grandfather, you talked about it during my intro, Vietnam veteran. He did 3 tours of Vietnam. He came home and he would have to change on the plane before he exited because people would spit on him, right? There's 58,000 names on the Vietnam Memorial. If we constructed a memorial for those that have lost their lives to the battle within, i.e. suicide or substance abuse, it'd be 4.5 times greater. 264,000 names would be on that. Let's look at that per year. Earlier I asked you how many lost their lives in Iraq and Afghanistan. 7,000. Every year, based off of what the VA reports, and we already concluded it's not necessarily 100% accurate. Again, nothing against the VA. The VA puts out a report every single year. Since 2001, we lose 6,100 veterans to suicide every single year. We lose the equal number to substance abuse every single year. So 61 plus 6,000, again, I'm a Citadel grad, that's over 12,000. That's almost double of what we lost in 20 years in combat. I know that when I took my oath of office, I swore to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I also understood that there was an unwritten clause that said this could include up to and including my life. I knew what I was getting into when I went to my first deployment. I knew what I was getting into when I went into combat the first time. I had no idea what I was getting into when I came home. And so that's why we've established WarriorWOD, is every year we're losing 12,000 veterans to the war within. Peel that back just slightly. Why are they taking their lives? I would much rather numb myself to death quickly through suicide or slowly through substance abuse than face the demons that I dream every single night. Face the demons of when I drive down the road and that trash bag looks like an IED. Face the demons when someone slams the door and I think we're getting a complex attack. That's why we've established WarriorWOD.
Over the phone, you went through some of those stats.
Yeah.
And it's different when you put a face into the conversation, right? It's different when you have the conversation in person. It just is in general.
Yeah.
And it's emotional for a lot of reasons. And I think I've had a number of members of my family serve in the military. I know a lot of people who have served in the military. I know a number of people who are still in the military. And you don't think about it because you're not in it every single. I'm not in it every single day, right? I at this point have not actually served in the military, and so I don't know what it's like, frankly. Yeah. But to hear it and to talk through it just brings a different level of it's an emotional nature to it, and it's good to know that there are people like you that are bringing better attention to it across the board. So first and foremost, thanks for all the work you're doing. And I'm glad you started this organization.
Yeah.
And the other reason I'm glad you started this kind of organization too is because I've realized how much of an impact fitness has had on my life. Now, I can't connect that to PTSD in any way, shape, or form, but I can connect it to my daily life. Oh, yeah. And I can say, okay, well, I work out on a daily basis in order to stay physically fit, yes. But there is 100% a mental aspect of that. Where if I don't work out for a week, right, I realize something, I don't feel great, right? Yeah. The anxiety starts to kick in. It's a slippery slope of sorts. So when it comes to just connecting with that at a personal level to better understand it, and for me personally, I just, once again, that's kind of how I go through things too. Is that you listen to it and you're like, okay, how can I connect to this personally? But I do. I feel like on a daily basis, I work out to stay mentally and physically strong, mentally and physically fit, right? So I can only see how beneficial this would be to individuals who are dealing with PTSD and any kind of mental issue across the board. So as you've grown this, as you've expanded it from day one to where you are now, I believe you said you're in 40 states with individuals across.
Right now we're in 32 states. Okay. That's including Puerto Rico. Okay. The only reason we're not in the other 18 states is we haven't had a veteran that needed our support in those areas that knew that we existed. Yet. We're starting a class in September 15th. I haven't looked at exactly which states they're coming from, but that's the only requirement. You're suffering post-traumatic stress, you served our country. If those two things happen, it doesn't matter where you're from. So
that intake process, let's kind of maybe go through that too. Just so people that are listening, if you know of somebody that served, is going through, has PTSD, has a mental health issue of some kind, needs the help, needs the support, this is a great organization to connect with. So what is the intake process kind of from just A to Z? How do people get started?
Yeah, so find us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, whatever avenue you want. You could go to WarriorWOD.org. There is an application, right? We want to make sure that you're a veteran. Does post-traumatic stress affect other individuals other than veterans? Absolutely. I had to start my niche somewhere. And we'll talk about what we're doing to help other individuals as well later. But go apply. What we ask is a little bit about your military history. Upload your DD-214. If you're a veteran, you know exactly what that is. The only ask that I have, black out your Social Security. I don't care about your Social Security. I don't want to see it. Fill out your information. Obviously as a up and coming nonprofit, funding is always a consideration. So if we have funding, we'll accept as many veterans as possible. We do it once a quarter. Right now it's once a quarter. Generally it's a March time frame, a June, July time frame, a September time frame, and a December time frame. We have plans to do it once a month. We're just not quite mature enough to do it at that capacity. Once you apply, I have Mandy Mims, who is my director of veteran programs. She'll start interacting with you. She'll do an entrance interview. If you meet the requirements, she'll continue through. Again, we rely on the generosity of people that have open hearts that want to take care of veterans. But as long as we have funding, we're going to accept as many as we possibly can. Yeah. Once the program starts, we've got a very structured program. For some veterans, it's maybe a little too structured. For some veterans, we may not be the right resource yet. Maybe in the future, let's take care of a few things first.
Right.
And we take care of veterans that are suffering with post-traumatic stress. We take care of veterans that have military sexual trauma. We take care of veterans that maybe haven't even seen combat, but they've been on a FOB somewhere, and the stress associated with being in that environment has, changed their, mental health. Okay. If you're struggling with a mental health issue and you're a veteran, and I don't care that you have a rating, don't have a rating, I personally don't care. We cut out the red tape. I don't need you to go and I don't know how familiar you are, but for you to get a disability rating, it's very, very hard with the military. I don't care that you have one or don't have one. You're suffering, you served our country. If those two things happened, we will consider you for part of our program. Right?
What does the program entail? So when somebody signs up, what is it? I don't necessarily have to share the secret sauce per se, but just so people kind of have a better understanding of once they sign up, this is what they're getting into. Because I feel like a lot of people, regardless of the program, they'd be like, "Oh, it's just another program, right? It's just another thing." So it's like, what makes this even more unique, right? And why should they take that final step? Aside from the fact that their mental health is not great and they're not doing well, what is the reason they should really take that next step?
That's a very, very loaded question. Yeah. Again, not a knock on the VA, but the typical prescription, and through my journey, I saw it as well, is antidepressants and talk therapy. Yeah. And so I got out in 2013. I finally had the courage to go and get help. I went to the VA. Not only did I have post-traumatic stress, but I had a TBI. And the first thing that they did was, hey, here's your antidepressant. If it doesn't work in 3 months, we'll give you another antidepressant. And so I went through 1. I went through 2. I went through 3. I think they have like 7 or 8 total that they can rotate through. And on my 3rd one, I looked at the adverse effects, and it said this could cause homicidal or suicidal ideations. The prescription that I was taking to help me with my mental health could cause me to go and kill myself. Right? And so what makes us different? We use exercise, nutrition, and mentorship as a prescription. I'm not saying it is in isolation of what mental health professionals give you. If the prescriptions work for you, awesome. I'm not discouraging that. Didn't work for me. For some people it does. If talk therapy works for you, awesome. Use that in conjunction of what we're doing. What we are asking you to do. Move your body, eat well, socialize with people that can, and this word is very, very important, empathize with you. Do you know the difference between sympathy and empathy?
I do.
What's sympathy?
Empathizing with the individual because of the experience that you mutually had, versus sympathizing because you care for their situation, or you care about them in the situation they're experiencing.
Yeah, 100%. And so, a lot of times, and good on you for really understand the minor difference between the two, right? Because a lot of people think sympathy, empathy, they interchange those words to feeling for somebody. I like to use an analogy. I've never been homeless. Never been homeless. I've lived in shitty situations. I've lived under the tank. I've lived in Iraqi homes. My time in the Marine Corps, I've lived in the field. But I've never been in a situation where every day of my life, I didn't know if I can be away from the elements, the weather. I haven't had to worry about where my next meal was coming from. I didn't have to deal with the people judging me because I don't have a home. And whatever my background was that led me to my situation on the streets, I've never had to deal with that. But I sympathize with them. I care about them. I want to help them, but I've never been there.
Right.
Empathy, however, for veterans, I understand what it's like to be in combat. I understand to see the worst part of war and humanity. I understand how it is to have a chemical addiction to numb my pain. I understand contemplating, have I done something that is against every piece of humanity? And I've also had survival guilt. I know what it's like to be a veteran. I empathize. I've lived their life. I've walked a mile in their shoes, right? And so when I think about it, the biggest word in our program is empathy. We are there to help veterans. It's a program surrounded by veterans to help veterans, veterans helping veterans. And so when we think about our program, every veteran in our program gets 6 months of a gym membership. And I don't care what type of gym it is. I subscribe to CrossFit. I'm not part of the cult, but I subscribe to that modality. Yeah. My wife, she works for Orange Theory. It's a great modality. We have veterans that do jiu-jitsu. We have veterans that do powerlifting. We have one veteran doing hula hoop dancing. If a veteran came to us and said, I want to do interpretive dancing, not necessarily my jam, not something I would ever want to do,
right.
But you know what? Go move your body. The second part of it, every veteran in our program, and you and I talked about this earlier, 90% of your accomplishments in the gym stem from how you eat. It starts in the kitchen. Every veteran in our program gets 6 months of certified nutrition coaching. Every 2 weeks, our nutrition coaches have a meeting with them and they talk about their goals. They talk about eating for what their goals are, the modality that they're working towards, and what they want to accomplish. And we've had veterans that have eating disorders, and we had veterans that are obese and everything in between. We had veterans eating to compete in CrossFit high-level competitions, and we had moms and dads that just want to be there for their kids. Right. We talk nutrition to what they want to accomplish. The last part, and I think the linchpin that holds WarriorWOD together, every veteran in our program, they get paired up with another veteran that has walked a mile in their shoes. It doesn't matter that you were in the Navy and I was in the Marine Corps. It doesn't matter that you were in the Army and I was in the Air Force. It doesn't matter. Different shades of camis. That's the only difference. Yeah. Yes, we bicker back and forth, and it's brotherly, sisterly love about making fun of all the different branches. Every one of us did some of the same things. We went through an introduction training pipeline, basic, boot camp, officer candidate school. It all sucked.
Right.
It all sucked. It doesn't matter what branch. Each one of us stood on a line at the position of attention and raised our right hand and swore to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Each one of us, in our own way, supported the war on terrorism, Panama, Vietnam, Desert Storm. Whether that was in garrison or that was forward deployed, we all had a part in that. Or, hey, there was no war going on, but we were training for that and we never knew what was going to come. We empathize with you. And so when I think about what's different about our program, we don't rely on antidepressants. Our prescription is exercise, nutrition, and mentorship. The research is there. There is so much research about go move your body. The University of Australia just did a massive research, the biggest of its kind. And it was published 2 years ago. Don't quote me on that. I'm doing this off of memory. But like 2 years ago, and they concluded that exercise, just a regular exercise regimen, is 1.5 times better than antidepressants and talk therapy combined. Let's talk about nutrition. Just eat the stuff that you're supposed to eat. Stop eating the shit that you're not supposed to eat.
Right.
It will decrease anxiety and depression by 36%. Socialization, mentorship, camaraderie. Very similar statistics on how it helps post-traumatic stress. What we have done is taken those three pillars and put it together. And what I think is really, really unique, and this is a bragging moment on WarriorWOD. I'm very proud of this. Independent research on how exercise helps. Independent research on how nutrition helps. Independent research on camaraderie, mentorship, socialization. There is no research when you put all three of them together. And so we were very blessed. The University of Kingston in London, and then simultaneously the College of Charleston came to us, unsolicited. They came to us and said, hey, we want to do research on their program. And then MUSC, the Medical University of South Carolina, they've joined the fight as well. They're helping us with a research project on when you combine all three, what it does.
Love it.
And what I think is just amazing, at some point, this is going to get published. And, we can talk about our impacts here in a second.
Yeah.
But at some point, this is going to get published. And at some point, it's going to be in some PhD level scholarly research journal where they come to the conclusion that exercise, nutrition, and mentorship is a prescription.
Right.
And it's not going to be just for veterans anymore, because somebody's going to see that and they're going to take our foundation, and whether they make it their own for whatever demographic, and I don't care, whatever demographic, or they plagiarize it to a T and they even claim that they came up with it, don't care. Go save more people's lives.
Yep.
Whatever demographic it is. And when we look across our U.S. population, whether it's first responders, lawyers, teachers, LGBTQ, whatever demographic you want to break this up, African American, it doesn't matter. We're all dealing with our own traumatic situations. And somebody's going to take our research, make it their own, and save more lives. So what WarriorWOD is doing right now, I think is just so freaking cool. We're paving the way that not only are we going to save more and more veterans' lives, we're going to save more American lives.
Right. I just love how passionate you are about it too.
Yeah.
And obviously this comes from a place of, for you, experiencing it, going through it, knowing it, walking the walk, talking the talk. And so many people nowadays, they do something, they start something, and you're like, well, have you ever done it before, right? Like professors or teachers or people that you're supposed to look up to that are teaching you and telling you how to do something a certain way. It's like, but have you ever actually done it? Have you ever actually experienced it? So there's something to be said about actually walking the walk.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And I'm sure that element of it is huge for guys and gals as they come into this program, because they're like, yeah, I actually respect these individuals, and I know it because they've actually been through it. With that being said, you kind of hinted at this earlier. You mentioned this being a lot more, you've talked about this, said this multiple times now, this being a lot more than just a program for veterans. So I'm curious to know, can you talk to that a little bit? Are you willing to talk to that a little bit more? And what is the long-term vision for this from maybe a veteran perspective, but also just a general organizational perspective?
I'm more than happy to talk about that. So at the way we are right now, we are 100% focused on the veteran.
Yeah.
But, and I have testimonial after testimonial, our program doesn't just affect the veteran. there is generally a family associated with it, whether that's a husband or wife, whether that's kids or parents, that want their loved one back. And so what we have done is given them that quality of life and then help them regain their lives so that they can be the best version of themselves, the best parent, a mother or father, best kid, whether, looking at their mother and father, whoever's still alive, and then their whole network. Every veteran that we work with have a network of people that they deal with, whether there's a sales professional or a mechanic or they work at the VA. There's a whole network of people that we're helping. So that's the short term. Where we're going to go in the future? That's a hard question. It's a very hard question. Right now, I'm pretty focused on veterans. There's been a lot of conversations internally of opening it up to first responders. I'm not against that one bit. First responders, they have so much of my appreciation and respect. I went to Iraq and I was there for a year and I came home. And then I had some time off and then I went back and I was there for 7 months and I came home, right? Most of our first responders, EMS, fire, police, there's multiple other types of first responders. I also include nurses in this as well. They live this every single day of their lives. It may be a 3-day shift, it may be a 2-day shift, it may be 24 hours, but, they don't get a break from it. And so there was a consideration about first responders. Will we get there? I don't know. But if we never get there with WarriorWOD supporting them, we will continue to partner with other organizations that do that. And we do that now. I think this research is a big piece of what we want to accomplish. And then we open up the demographics so much wider than veterans.
Right.
And I think it has, right now I'm thinking mostly of the U.S. population, but there's implications across the world on what WarriorWOD's doing and how it can help other people. And again, take any demographic in the world, they have their own trauma, and it can help them. Movement is therapy. Research backs it up. One of the things that I think is really funny, not funny, I use that word incorrectly. Disappointing is a better word. Why were antidepressants developed in the first place?
I'd like to think to treat depression.
It was a seizure medicine. It was first developed to prevent seizures. But the receptors that antidepressants block from a seizure perspective also block from a depression perspective. It was never developed for antidepressants. It was a seizure medicine. And so not only are we taking a medicine that was never developed for that reason, but we're just throwing it at people and we wonder why nobody's recovering. It was never developed for that reason. But you know what? The way our biology is set up, our DNA is set up, us as Homo sapiens were built, go move your body, go get sunlight. The world presents its own quote-unquote antidepressants through exercise, nature, move your body, the sunlight, just walking outside, the serotonin that just is secreted from your body just by having natural sunlight.
You're not the first person, so this is the second podcast in which, obviously completely different backgrounds, right? In which we've talked about big pharma and prescription drugs and all the above, right? So many problems have been solved over the years by the pharmaceutical industry, right? But also on the other hand, so many problems are not being solved, right? There's so many things that are not really being solved at their core. And the number of, and I always hate those people that say, oh, I've got so many friends that have this experience. I'd love to say particular names, but in this situation, you don't say names, right? But I know you have plenty of experiences. You also personally experienced it where you were given certain drugs to try to solve a problem, but you knew that it wasn't actually solving the core problem. It was just kind of masking it to a certain degree. So talking about movement as therapy is huge, and I think people say it, right? We say, oh, it's great to exercise, it's wonderful. It's like it's so much more than that, right? It is essential It's essential to our daily lives, to an optimized lifestyle,
Yep.
right? And I think I've personally tried so hard to try to optimize my life in so many different ways. The right nutrients, the right exercise, the right sleep schedules. I don't sleep well, right? But it's like at the end of that, you try. But it's so true that at the core, movement is therapy, getting outside, being human. And we try every single day to make ourselves less human. It's like, why not just try to focus on being more human?
Agreed, 100%. And, I don't have a PhD. Let's just establish that up front. And I'm not an MD. But there's so much research that says just go walk. Go walk an hour twice a week, and you'll reduce your antidepressants. We were built with the resources we needed. And in today's culture, and this is not a bashing session, I promise it's not a bashing session. We are so quick to just sit on the couch. We're so quick to turn on Netflix or Hulu or whatever streaming provider you have. But if we were just as quick to go walk around the neighborhood, and I'm looking outside of your window, man, like, you've got a beautiful view here in Charleston, South Carolina. Just go walk, and it will change everything. You're stressed about work? Cool. Go outside for 10 minutes. Just get the sunlight. Go move your body. And it doesn't have to be rigorous. It doesn't have to be, CrossFit Games, or the Olympics are going on right now, and there's some amazing just athletes in that. You don't have to be at that capacity. Just walk. And if walking is too much, cool, just go be outside.
Right.
If walking's not enough, cool, go run. If running's not enough, build yourself up, right? But be a better version of yourself every single day. And you and I had this conversation earlier. I don't remember if the camera was rolling or not, but 1%. Just be 1% better. That's it. Cool, you walked 2 miles today. You walked 2 miles. Got it. Go walk 2 miles and a quarter. Or, hey, you know what? Walk 1.75 and jog the other quarter. Whatever it is, just be 1% better at the end of the day, and you'll reap the benefits. And it cascades, not just in your mental health, your personal life, your professional life, in every aspect. And I can tell you from my experience, man, and you read my bio or wherever that came from. I graduated from the Citadel in 2005, and literally graduated on May 5th. May 6th, I showed up at Quantico, Virginia, and I started being a Marine officer. I had OJT time before I went to the basic school, and I graduated the basic school, did all my MOS training, and almost immediately after getting through my schools, I was told, you're deploying to Iraq. I'm 22 years old. I don't know my ass from my elbow. I really don't. Made some stupid mistakes. And I was told, hey, congratulations, you're going to be a combat advisor. Didn't know quite what that meant, but I was going to go and train Iraqis. And when we first deployed, and literally we were in Iraq doing our last little bit of training, and they changed our orders. They're like, hey, we originally thought, hey, we're going to go to Kabbalah, which was a Shia stronghold. You got Joshua Mahdi, I think that's how you say it. It was JAM, J-A-M. And we were going to literally teach people how to shoot, tie their shoes, put on their uniforms. It was going to be like boot camp style. And while we were at our last training event in Baghdad, they changed our orders. Congratulations, you're going to Ramadi. And the battle for Ramadi was kicking off. It was one of the most deadly, if not the most deadly battle in Iraq. And they're like, congratulations, you're going to go there. And not only that, the battalion you're going to work with, the Iraqi battalion you're going to work with, they've been doing this for several years, and they're actually pretty damn good. So you're not going to teach them how to shoot. You're not going to teach them how to tie their shoes. You're going to take them on operations. And you're going to advise them in the middle of these operations. And, we hear these massive stories of Chris Kyle and Marcus Luttrell. Marcus Luttrell and his brother were there. Mikey Mansour, Navy SEAL, they got the Medal of Honor. He got the Medal of Honor the day we got there, right? And we hear about Jocko and Leaf Babe and these individuals that just we hold at high regards. They were there. This was that battle that we watch on TV when we watch American Sniper, right? And it was a long year, a pivotal year for me. I learned so much, and it developed. I would never change a moment of that. And you talked about the MIT team, right? And just some amazing individuals, and I've got the highest regard for everybody that was on that team. But I came home after that year with wounds. Physically, I got hit by an ID. If you've ever seen Monty Python, they have that scene that's merely a flesh wound, right? I took some shrapnel. It wasn't catastrophic. It was merely a flesh wound. But I came back with a lot of mental wounds. The Marine Corps, and I'm assuming all of DOD, they had the stigma. Leaders did not have mental health issues. You just didn't. And if you did, you weren't fit for command, and you weren't fit to have the security clearance. Now, was that true or not? I don't know, but I subscribed to it. And so I came home in 2007, and I hid my wounds. 2009, I started skydiving, and it started off as a hobby, but it quickly became an addiction. You have veterans that get into and active duty as well. They get into alcohol. They get into drugs. They suffer silently. My way of coping was a chemical by itself. It was adrenaline. I did 4,000 skydives over 10 years. And that sounds really cool. It sounds like, oh, wow, what a cool background. And I did some very cool things. But if I didn't do 15 or 20 skydives in a weekend, I couldn't function very well on Monday. I needed that adrenaline, that chemical to be able to function. And then just doing the number of skydives wasn't enough. And I started pushing it, getting riskier and riskier and riskier. Fast forward to, I'm out now. I had this epiphany, 2014, 2015, that if I continue this, I was going to kill myself. Accidentally, right? But I was going to do something that caused me to die. So go back to when I was in the military. I'm doing these skydives, and I'm trying to cope in the best way I can. And in 2013, I had this realization that my time was over in the military. And we can talk about that. That's a long tangent story, but I made a decision that it's time for me to exit. And I did some really great things in the military, and I wouldn't change anything about it. It made me who I am today. But then I went and got the VA, and we talked about the antidepressants. And it didn't work for me. And, finally I looked at the VA and I said, take me off the antidepressants. I can't do this anymore. Because what was happening is socially and occupationally I was plummeting. I got out in 2013, got an amazing job right out of the military. And quite frankly, if I was the leader that was in charge of me then, I would have fired me. I would have. I had a relationship, ended up getting married, and I was not a good husband. I wasn't present, and it ended up resulting in a divorce. And I was losing friends left and right. And then in 2015, very randomly, and I don't know what made me do this. To this day, I think about it, and I would love to give you a good, I had this epiphany. No, I was bored one night, and I Googled gyms near me. And maybe I was getting a little pudgy, maybe I felt out of shape, ego played, I don't know. But I Googled gyms near me, and there was a gym a mile away from my house. Happened to be a CrossFit gym. Again, I said this earlier, I'm not in the cult. I promise I'm not in the CrossFit cult. But what I thought was beautiful about it is my first day I walked in, and I don't know if you've ever done CrossFit. If you haven't, don't judge me.
Did it for a brief period. Well, 8 months.
Okay.
It was semi-CrossFit, yeah.
Yeah. But when you walk into most boxes across the United States, you see the American flag, and you see the Marine Corps flag, and the Army flag, and the Air Force flag, and the Navy flag. And sometimes you'll see the Coast Guard, arguably Department of Homeland Security, Department of Defense, I don't know. And you'll see a flag with the blue line and a flag with the red line. And we do these things called hero WODs, where we honor those that have fallen. The person that finishes last gets this massive eruption of the crowd.
Yep.
And when you get a personal best, everybody congratulates you. I'm not talking about the actual movements, and I'm not talking about the modalities. I'm talking about the culture.
Yep.
There's a culture associated. And, last week CrossFit had a lot of issues in its own. I still love, the community, watching the community come around it. It's a community that changed it. Within a year of being in that place, I was off of antidepressants. And I was still skydiving, but I didn't have the urge. If I did one skydive, if I did no skydives, it didn't matter.
Right.
It was now fun again. It wasn't an addiction. 1 year of moving my body, thinking about nutrition and mentorship, and it took away everything I was struggling with. Did I still have, issues? Everybody has issues, but I didn't have to rely on antidepressants.
Okay.
And then fast forward, now I'm occupationally just doing significantly better. Promotion. Concurrently, I met my beautiful wife right now. Amazing individual. Has changed my life for so many good reasons. And life is getting better. I'm meeting friends. I'm, prospering. Absolutely prospering. And in 2019, I had this opportunity. My company I was working with at the time said, "Hey, Phil, we're going to promote you to a regional director. You can live anywhere in the Southeast." And I was born and raised in Charleston, South Carolina. If somebody listening hasn't been to Charleston, I urge you to do it. It's, in my opinion, the most beautiful place in the world. But I looked at my wife. I'm living in Houston at the time, and this is an important part of the conversation. She's a Texan. She's an Aggie. She is a Texan. If you've ever met a Texan, you know that they're a Texan. And, Texas is where they live and where they'll probably die. And I looked at her one day, and we're, not even engaged at this point. And I go, her name's Tessa. Tessa, listen, I just got promoted. We can live anywhere in the Southeast. My grandfather, we talked about earlier, he's getting a little old. I don't get to see him very much. I would like to go home to Charleston. And I had 15 reasons why we should, and I had the argument planned out, and she goes, "Okay, let's do it." I'm missing a beat. We moved. Our house got on the market. A month later, we were in Charleston. Another Citadel grad, Rodney Hancock. If you need a house, go talk to him. Amazing human being. Also, one of the best baseball players that the Citadel's ever had. He showed us 10 houses in one day. We found our house. We moved to Charleston. So May, we put our house on the market. June 19th, we show up. As any CrossFitter does, part of my checklist in moving was finding a new CrossFit gym. And I reached out to 3. I won't tell you the other 2, but I can tell you the one that I landed on, Ironbridge CrossFit. And I messaged their owner. And again, it's just this random email. I have no idea who I'm talking to. Ends up being Shannon McDaniel, one of the best people I've ever met. Consider her family and her husband Donnie family. And I tell her, "Hey, we're moving in." And she goes, and this is going about the community again. "Cool. When are you showing up? Let me know, and I'll send my coaches to help you move in." She's never met me. I could be the biggest douchebag in the world. Never met me. It didn't matter to her. She was going to help me. So I found my home. And I showed up, I think it was June 20th or 21st. And I walk in and I talk to Shannon, and she goes, "Listen, you're a veteran, right?" "Yeah, I'm a veteran."
She's like, listen, 4th of July is coming up. Every 4th of July, we do something a little different. Every day of that week surrounding 4th of July, Monday through Sunday, we do a WarriorWOD, honoring someone that has fallen in combat. Every single day we do a tribute to that individual, and every workout is for that person. We have an extra day on July 3rd. Do you have somebody that you would like to honor? And I was like, absolutely. One of my closest friends from the Citadel, his name is Joshua Booth, Charlie Company, 2005. The day I landed in Iraq, October 17th, he was killed by a sniper in Haditha, Iraq. I was like, I would love to honor him. Just amazing human being. I would love to honor him. She put together a workout and we did it. So July 3rd, I came. She put together a workout that perfectly honors Josh. Josh was an amazing human being, physically a massive specimen, and this would have been a perfect workout for him. Crushed me. I'm not that good. And I'm sitting there, we finish, I'm catching my breath, / I was dying on the floor, kind of laying in my sweat. And she walks up and goes, Phil, I want you to go talk to that guy over there. His name's Justin. Just go talk to him. No context. Zero context.
Yep.
So I walk over to Justin. Hey, Justin, I'm Phil. Shannon said I need to come talk to you. He was like, man, thank you for allowing me to do Josh's workout. It meant a lot for me to honor Josh. It would be really important to me if you came back tomorrow and did the workout dedicated to my brother. And so he starts talking. He's like, my older brother, Nick Riccio, he was a Lance Corporal in the Marine Corps, was in the Battle of Fallujah, got hit by an IED. He came home and, he got into some drugs, some alcohol, and I'm his younger brother, and I'm looking up to my brother who's this, iconic Marine, and I started following in his footsteps. And Nick, it gets worse. The antidepressants the VA prescribed him wasn't enough. So then it was antidepressants plus a six-pack. That wasn't enough. And then it was shots of whiskey. That wasn't enough. Then it became a fifth of whiskey. That wasn't enough. And then he turned to drugs, and he went through the spectrum of drugs. And I'm looking up to my brother. I'm following in his footsteps. 10 years after Nick came home, he took his life. And that was my wake-up call. And I turned to CrossFit. And this amazing human being, Justin, is somebody that just is a hero. He changed his life. He now is a youth pastor. He has 3 beautiful kids, an amazing wife, Brittany. He changed his life, but it was because he started moving his body. Now, use my background. Selfishly, it was like, yeah, that helped me. And then I hear Justin talk. I was like, there's something here. And then, as I start listening, I start hearing people all the time, veteran, non-veteran, it doesn't matter what demographic, start saying things like, if it wasn't for exercise, I would be dead. If it wasn't for exercise, I would have committed suicide. If it wasn't for exercise, I would be in, rehab right now. Just telling me how exercise is helping their body. And then we talked earlier, during COVID, I lost so many friends to suicide. And now I'm really listening.
Right.
Really listening. And when we think about it, that was really the birth of WarriorWOD. Yes, my story independently, anybody can go through. And then I hear Justin's story, and I hear all these other individuals, countless individuals, tell me how exercise helped them. But I think this really puts WarriorWOD in perspective. I had a veteran, and if I start tearing up, I apologize, adjust the video. Or don't adjust the video. November of 2022, I had a veteran apply to our program. Army veteran, works with the VA. He served in Afghanistan, has multiple medals for Valor. Think about a hero, right? He's suffering. I don't know how to the extent, but he's suffering, and he applies to our program. Now, let's peel this back, and I've had this epiphany since, I wasn't smart enough back then, but this individual works for the VA, the organization that has given the responsibility to take care of us once we take off our uniform, both physically and mentally. And he works for the organization that has all these resources. I don't know what their budget is, but just for, shits and giggles, multiple millions of dollars that they get, federal funding every single year. And he knows how to navigate the red tapes, and he's still struggling. He has access to any program he wants. He applies to us in November. Our next class, because we start once a quarter, starts January 3rd. A very important date. January 3rd, he starts. He has an Instagram account that is showing his progression, right? It's solely, he built it just for what he's doing for WarriorWOD. He's got like 20 followers. I'm 2 of them, my personal and WarriorWOD. And I can see, stuff changing. Again, I'm not smart enough at that moment to see the drastic change. And every single month, every veteran in our program fills out a survey. And so we're tracking. We use the PCL5, which, if you're not familiar with that, it's a DSM, post-traumatic stress checklist 5. What the 5 is, I couldn't tell you. It's 20 questions, and you, the veteran, or you, the individual, it's not just for veterans, go through and you rank it 1 through 5, how severe it is. 1, doesn't bother me at all. 5, it consumes my life. 20 questions. And so he fills that out every single month, and I could trend it, I could see he's improving. Again, don't know to what magnitude. He graduates at the end of June, early July, and in August of last year, he calls me. And he goes, Phil, I want to talk to you. 15 minutes, I'll be out of your hair, let's talk. 15 minutes turning into multiple hours, 2+ hours. And he starts off, hey, thank you. This program has done so much for me. I've lost 13% body fat, 30 pounds. Hell yeah, man. That's awesome. Can you imagine what that does for your just confidence, your mental health? Just looking in the mirror and seeing 30 pounds less, 13% body fat lost. Congratulations. And I'm celebrating with him. Back in my mind, I'm thinking, we're very mental health focused, but I could see how this helps.
Right.
And then he goes, Phil, let me tell you why I really called. Let me talk to you about what I really want to share with you. The program started January 3rd. What's 9 days beforehand? 9 days before Christmas. And he goes, Phil, listen. On Christmas, my wife and daughter, his daughter was 2 at the time. My daughter's now 2. So talk about empathy. We had that conversation about empathy. Yep. My heart pours for him right now because I can only just picture that very vividly. Phil, my daughter and my wife are in the next room, open up presents. And I'm struggling so bad. I can't enjoy that moment with them right now. I worked my ass off this year to be able to provide, and I can't just go into the next room and watch my daughter open these presents and watch her joy as she's opening these presents. And I can't enjoy my wife celebrating this moment. And I'm sitting there in my bedroom on my bed. I've got a pistol in my lap. And I'm ready to take my life. And as I'm thinking about this, and it doesn't matter that it was my program, it could have been any program, he goes, I sat there and I took a pause and I realized I had this program starting. I don't know anything about the program, but it's starting in 9 days. I was like, I can make it 9 days. And what he was telling me is he had hope that maybe, and again, he doesn't know shit about my program, maybe this program could change it. And he goes, I'll wait 9 days. He started my program. We got him in a gym, and we introduced him as his nutrition coach, and we introduced him as his battle buddy. He was like, all right, I can go one more day. One more day. And he said that every single day for several weeks, one more day. I could make it one more day. And one day turned into 3 days, which turned into a week. Then it turned into 2 weeks. And then it turned into a month. And now this individual is prospering. Absolutely just prospering. And I think about this, and he's asked me not to share his name. I can share his story, so I'm being very conscious of that. But as I think about this, there is a mother and a wife that is not a single mother trying to survive, that did not have to bury her husband. There is a daughter, now 3 years old, going on 3 years, that forevermore Christmas is not ruined. His parents are alive. There is a mother and father that didn't have to bury their kid. And he worked for the VA. There's a network of veterans that are better because he's still alive. And he's a battle buddy for us. He's one of our mentors. And so there's veterans in my program that are better because he is working with them. The world is a better place. And when he's talking to me, and this hits me hard, he goes, your program, it gave me joy and it gave me a purpose. Now, when I brought up the PCL5 earlier, one of the questions in the PCL5, have you lost joy in things you love to do? Now, we could talk about our impact here in a second. The question that we had the biggest impact on was, have you lost joy in things you love to do? We saw 36% improvement in just that one alone. Just that one alone, right? To me, that summarizes our program. We're giving people the quality of life that they deserve. We're literally saving veterans' lives. Let's take that a step farther. In 2023, I had 9 veterans across the 32 states that we work with right now, right? They don't know each other. Every one of them that gave me their story, that they were contemplating taking their life, they all said the same thing. I have found joy. I don't know about you, man, but have you ever lost joy in something you love to do to the point where you were contemplating taking your life?
Not personally. No.
This is a sympathy moment, right?
Yep.
Right? And so all 9 of them said, I found joy. What is WarriorWOD doing? We're saving veterans' lives. And I tell you all of that because go back to what we offer. Exercise is therapy. Exercise is the prescription. It's very easy to say, oh, I got a gym membership. It's just a gym membership. No shit. Exercise saves people's lives.
Right.
If you want to know what WarriorWOD does, it saves lives. Last year, just last year alone, we had 110 veterans come through our program. We saw a 29% decrease in post-traumatic stress symptoms. 29%. That's almost a third.
It's huge.
And there's 9 people walking around on this earth right now. The world is literally a better place because they're still here.
Absolutely.
That's WarriorWOD.
I love it.
I know I consumed a lot of the conversation right there.
No, so I had a few questions, and
by all
you,
means.
you answered a lot of them, and that's why I do not want to interrupt. That was incredible, and I really appreciate you going into such depth. One of the things I've realized about you is that a lot of this, while I've already given a background on you, I've already kind of told your story a little bit. You've told your story as well. You give an overview, and you dive into enough detail, but you don't make it about yourself. And there are
not about me.
right, and I think that's what, and I think a lot of people probably really appreciate. I just met you for the first time tonight, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of people probably really appreciate that about you because you don't really make it about yourself. You make it about the impact that you want to have on people's lives. And so many people struggle to articulate that properly. And it's something you do not struggle to articulate. And I just want to provide you with that because that's the one thing I've in analyzing you this evening, which I feel like we're always analyzing people, right? In sales, we analyze people all the time.
100%.
So just being very real about that. That is very hard for people to articulate, and so once again, I appreciate that. But also, I just think that that's huge that you can do that, and I know the impact you're going to have and already have, and are going to continue to have is going to be great because of your ability to articulate that. And people 100% connect with you, and will continue to connect with you because of that, which is amazing. In kind of you mentioned some big names. You mentioned Jocko and some other huge names that experienced the Battle of Ramadi. Philip Palmer also experienced the Battle of Ramadi, right? And I think just kind of going back to that too. That was one of the biggest pieces for me, where you probably experienced a lot of your trauma probably stems from that particular time in your life. There's an entire year there, but that particular experience for you, this was one of those maybe areas that might be a little bit off. Maybe we can't discuss it, but I am curious to know a little bit more about that particular experience for you. Where I don't know how often you talk about it, but I'd be interested to just learn a little bit more about that time specifically.
Great question. I don't think I've been asked that before. So it was a year that was pivotal in who I am today for the best reasons and the worst reasons. When I think about the team of individuals that I was with, there was 6 officers, 4 lieutenants, and 2 captains. Take me out of the equation, the other 5 were probably the best individuals I've ever met in my life. And I've had the pleasure, I was the one that got out significantly earlier than the rest. They all retired as lieutenant colonels or greater, right? And it changed my life in many different ways. John Welch, he was probably the closest to me in age, the closest to me in rank. He was a first lieutenant, just got promoted to first lieutenant. I was a brand new second lieutenant. Again, I didn't know my ass from my elbow. He's been to a deployment. This was my first deployment. And he took me under his wing, and he just mentored the hell out of me. And I've got so much respect for him. He's in the reserves right now. He's part of the Marine Corps just started something, and I'm glad that they finally did this. The innovative, whatever the unit's called, but they're looking at like experts around the world that's not military and how it could impact working Google and other organizations. And he's one of the department heads there. And just this guy is one of the smartest guys I've ever met in my life. He taught himself Arabic in 6 months, and it was one of those things that the Iraqis would question whether he was native or not. Just blew me away. We had Chris Tierney, father of 2, amazing husband, could build a relationship with anyone. He was a lieutenant as well, and he had this calm, cool, collective nature about him. Even when things were bad, he just was a good dude. And Dan Struzik. Dan retired as a lieutenant colonel. And so did Chris. He retired as a lieutenant colonel. But Dan retired last April, I believe. I think it was April Fool's. I guess joke on him. I don't know.
Did he actually retire? That's the question.
He did retire. He became either a contractor or a GS. Still doing amazing things for the Marine Corps. Still working on the Marine Corps. But his experience really touched me in a way that I didn't realize until I became a father. So I've got a 2-year-old daughter. In my opinion, the best daughter. I mean, she's not only beautiful, smart, athletic, just amazing individual. I hope in 10 years she hears this podcast. But Dan had something going on in his life. He's a little older than me. He was a Mustang, so he was enlisted. I think he was a staff sergeant and then became an officer. Just an amazing leader. And but his wife was pregnant, and his daughter was born, I think it was a month or two after we deployed. Again, we're in the battle for Ramadi, and very kinetic situation. And I watched him as a dumb 22-year-old go through this pivotal part of his life. And I see how he was beforehand, and then he had his daughter. And he wasn't going to see his daughter for 10 months. Can you imagine not being there for your birth of your daughter and then showing up on the back end and she's 10 months old? I got to watch Sophie, my daughter, from day one. And he was the reason why I waited so late to have kids. Why? Because I wasn't going to... And I watched him. It was... He never confided, and so this is an assumption on my part, but I think he was worried about, because of the situation we were in, leaving his wife and daughter without a father and husband.
Right.
I truly think that, and he earned so much of my respect, but I didn't really archive that into my brain until literally the day my daughter was born. March 1st of 2022, I had this moment where I thought about Dan and what he must have gone through. And, so those are the lieutenants, and then myself, the dumb version of all of them. Then we had 2 captains. Now, Ryan Cray retired last year as a lieutenant colonel as well. Just somebody that had the biggest heart of everyone he ever interacted with. Amazing human being. I can't wait to see what he accomplishes now that he's retired. And he has, a beautiful family as well. And then Jim Lively. You want to hear what leadership is? Let me tell you what the worst ass chewing I've ever had in my life. Now, you and I went to the Citadel. We had plenty of ass chewings. I was a collegiate wrestler. I played sports throughout high school. I had my fair share of ass chewings. I went through officer candidate school and the basic school and all my MOS schools. Plenty of ass chewings. The worst ass chewing I've ever had in my life came from Jim Lively. Texas A&M grad, I'm not going to hold that against him. He was in the Corps of Cadets. But I did something stupid. I don't remember what I did stupid. But this is when we were in the battle for Ramadi. And at the time, our offices were also our bedrooms and everything else. And he calls me in and he goes, Deuce, my call sign was Wassa 2. I've got an intel background, so it's fitting. He called me Deuce. Deuce, sit down. And he says it in this tone. Phil, I'm highly disappointed in you. I'm really disappointed in you. You can leave. That was 2006. And it still hits me. It still strikes a chord with me. But you know what really drove that? I had so much respect for Jim. And June 30th, I drove up, my wife, my daughter, and I drove up to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and I watched Jim Lively get promoted to general. And way back in 2006, Dan, Chris, and John and I all had a conversation about there's no way this individual is not going to be a general. And it's now there. So when I think about the year that I spent, and I'm sure that, you anticipated this conversation going into combat and stuff, what I really remember are those individuals that had an impact on me. Now, we can talk about the situation. We showed up, it was very kinetic. We were getting complex IED'd, or complex attacks, multiple IEDs. We had mass casualty events. We had a lot of stuff happen. And we saw the worst of the war. And then by the time we left, the Sunni awakening happened. And Sheikh Sattar, he was killed. Soon after we left, or I think actually as we were leaving, he was killed. You know, the Sunni awakening happened, and the Sunni tribal leaders came to the table, and they started working with us, and they were tired of Iraq and Al Qaeda in Iraq, you know, and all the stuff that they were doing. They were doing a lot of murder and intimidation stuff. You know, we watched the full spectrum of war, and not many people, especially as somebody brand new to the military, gets to see the worst of war, and then it changed to the best of war. By the end of the time we left, we were doing humanitarian assistance and handing out food, and we built a soccer stadium, right? And so we got to see all of that. But what really hits me the most about that year is those 5 men and the impact that they had on my life. And I could go back to the Citadel and some of the individuals that had impacts in my life, but damn, John, Chris, Dan, Ryan, and Jim, I would not be the man I am today if it wasn't for their, against all better judgment, leadership to me, and mentoring me and developing me. They could have left me high and dry. I was just a dumb second lieutenant, and they chose to make me a better man. So that was my year in Ramadi.
It's kind of, to your point, it's not the response I was expecting, but it's exactly what I would expect from you.
Yeah.
As I mentioned earlier, you articulate it super well, and you tell the story. You make it not about yourself, but about the experiences and about the people who've had an impact on you. And so that's to a certain degree, it's actually exactly what I was expecting. But no, that's amazing, and I think it kind of goes back to all the time we talk about the Citadel a lot, but having those experiences with your people around you, right? But at the end of the day, you remember the people, right?
Oh, yeah.
You don't. I mean, you remember. You talk about the stories from time to time, but you more so remember and you discuss the relationships that you built.
We are by nature a tribal organism, right? Like as primates, and are you evolution, not evolution? I don't care what your opinion is. By nature of who we are, we're primates and we're tribal. Bad things happen. It's the people that get you through it. That's why I believe in mentorship so much, and that's why I think it's a linchpin of what we do, and that's why I think empathy is so important. But even going back to the Citadel, Chad Bryant, when I was the company commander of Delta, and I lost that rank and stupid stuff happened. Chad Bryant, who was my XO, he was also, he went into the military afterwards. He went into the Army. He's got a Purple Heart. He had a lieutenant that was a Citadel grad. We all ended up dying in Afghanistan under his command. Chad is one of the most amazing human beings I've ever met in my life. PJ Calagridis, when I was company commander, he was my human affairs officer. And he gave 2 shits about the Citadel. Wouldn't wear shirt stays, even though he's my roommate. I gave him crap about it all the time. That guy was amazing. Louis Costa, he was my academics officer. One of the best dentists in the Low Country. I think his practice is now in Beaufort. Just an amazing human being. Jake Foster and John Foster, they were cousins. They were in the company as well. It's the people that you surround yourself with that makes you who you are. We could talk about our significant others. I just met your beautiful girlfriend and my amazing wife. Those are who make you the person and enables you to go off and do the things that you do. Right. And so I truly believe that. And I also, this is something that you didn't ask, but one of the things that I think is a guiding principle for me, I walked in, how are you doing? Right. And I wanted to stop the conversation, but we're moving fast. We're trying to get things going. Yeah. Anybody listening to this, I got to remind myself of this. Stop that. Just stop asking how people are doing with the expectation that they're going to say fine and you're going to move on to conversation. ask people how they're doing and mean it. Cameron, how are you doing? And if you tell me anything other than just fine, I need to stop and say, no, seriously, man, how are you doing? What's going on in your life? And actually care. It's one thing to, ask the question, but you got to genuinely care, because if we want to move the needle, mental health is at a high, obesity is at a high, our society, depending on, how you're looking at it, we're plagued with so many issues, and we can talk in lengths of the reasons why, and it doesn't actually matter. Take a moment and care about someone and actually ask them how they're really doing, and don't accept I'm fine. But when you dig into it, actually care and listen, and whatever they say, be in that moment. And if you can't empathize, sympathize, but give them at least that.
That was a key part of, hopefully the future of this show, and what is being created here is bringing on more people that are able to genuinely talk about issues that they're experiencing, that they have experienced, that they're going through as humans. There's a huge human element to this that a lot of people are missing, right? And hopefully we can continue to dive into this and have more individuals like yourself open up about what they're really going through, so you start solving the problems at their core.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of just continuing to mask them. We talked a lot about that earlier, too. And I feel like a lot of us are just masking issues without solving the problem at its core. So I really appreciate you not only coming on and taking the time to drive the hour over here to do this. And once again, there's a number of other questions I was going to ask about.
Feel free to shoot.
And all the above. I almost want to say, let's take it for a second episode.
Okay, let's do that.
Second episode, either in a gym or in another setting. And we can ask the questions we have not asked necessarily, but I'd also like to see how things progress in the next 2, 3, 4 months.
Yeah,
and then come back to it at that point. But I do want to say, thank you for taking the time to join me, tell the story. Once again, provide people with an understanding that as much of a man's man as you are, there's also an emotional side of this, a very real side of this, that more people need to start connecting to and talking about. Because we, as more specifically men, do not do enough of that. But
that's a whole nother podcast by itself,
right? Which is why I was going to say there's a lot of questions I'd like to ask, a lot of topics I want to talk to. I wasn't entirely sure, and for those that are continuing listening, I wasn't entirely sure which direction we were going to go with this tonight. I think we got to cover a lot about the organization and what you were accomplishing and what you're planning on doing and striving for, which is huge. But also we got to kind of get deeper into the details and the weeds of who you are as an individual, which it sounds like you've shared that story a number of times with people, and I do so appreciate that, because not many people will really share that story at that depth. But hopefully what we accomplish from doing this is just getting that story out there, helping people to realize that there are resources for them.
Oh yeah.
To help them when they're going through these issues. And there are mentors and there are support systems and people that actually do empathize and sympathize, that want to be there for them to support them through this time. Do not hesitate to reach out. Don't hesitate to share a name. You can communicate with me directly via my social media or my account, or you can reach out directly to Phil, which I'm going to share all your stuff. Do you mind sharing some links and some contact information?
Yeah, so for WarriorWOD, all of our social media platforms, it's the WarriorWOD. Whether that's Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever it is, TikTok, believe it or not, we've got a TikTok. Blew me away that we blew up.
But you on TikTok?
I have one. I think I've had one little video. I think it's my daughter. But so the WarriorWOD, we did one video on suicide awareness like 3 years ago, and overnight we went from 0 followers to like 80,000 followers. Because I think people relate to it, right? And so, regardless of the social media platform, it's the WarriorWOD. I'm terrible at social media, so don't judge me too hard. Anybody that's struggling, veteran, not veteran, I don't care. Reach out to me directly. my email address, and I'm happy to put this out there because people, may not feel comfortable just reaching out, phone call, whatever. But if somebody's suffering, Phil, PHIL, at WarriorWOD. WOD is WOD, stands for work out of the day, but WOD, so WarriorWOD.org. If you want to come to our website, if you're a veteran needing help, WarriorWOD.org, again, WOD is WOD. If you are a person that needs our help, please come out, right? Reach out to us. When people ask, how can you help? I boil it down to one word: awareness. There are veterans listening. There's veterans that aren't listening, but family members or friends that are listening. Tell a veteran that this is a resource. That's our number one priority. Get veterans help. Awareness around people that have time and talent to be able to help us. I am literally one DNA strand away from a Neanderthal. Literally. I'm not very smart. Steve Jobs said this once. I don't care if you're an Apple person or Android person. I think this is a very important quote. We hire talent not to tell them what to do, but for them to tell us what to do. Now let's change that phrase a little bit. I associate myself with people to tell me what to do, not for me to tell them what to do. Because you're smarter than me. Everybody listening to this has a talent I do not that can help us move our mission further. And then lastly, the last piece of awareness I need is people that have a generous heart and have the ability to help us from a funding standpoint do our number one mission of taking care of more veterans. So as people are listening to this, reach out to me in any platform you think is appropriate. But my one ask, help us build some awareness. I truly believe we're doing great work, and I want to continue to do that and help more and more people.
Do you have a donate link on the website too?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the best way. It goes through a third party. There's a tax deduction capability associated with that. Yes, you can mail me a check. I prefer you get the tax deduction. Go through our website. It all automates. That way you can go to the IRS and benefit from it too.
Well, I am pumped for the second episode.
Yeah.
Will come in the near future, hopefully.
Absolutely.
But once again, thank you so much for taking the time tonight to share more about your story and tell us more about WarriorWOD.
Awesome, dude.
Really
appreciate it. Yeah,
Absolutely.
likewise.